I promised to attend my daughter's biggest career event, but canceled that morning because her brother didn't want to be alone. I assumed she'd understand because she was always the strong one, just like every time I put his needs before hers. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I turned off the event reminder while listening to my son breathe on the other side of the phone. I didn't think too much about it at that moment, or so I tell myself now. I had the phone in my hand, the alarm vibrating softly on the kitchen table, and Lucas's voice coming and going as if each breath cost him more than the last. He spoke slowly, without dramatizing, but with that tone I know all too well. The same one that had preceded long nights, dangerous silences, that feeling of always being on the edge of something unseen but sensed. I chose to stay home, convinced that one absence couldn't ruin a future. That was the phrase I repeated to myself as I swiped my finger and turned off the notification. Just once, just today. I thought some decisions were self-justifying, that some moments were more important than others, even if it hurt to admit it. That night I understood how wrong I was, but I didn't know to what extent yet. I'm Marta. I'm 58 years old, and I'm the mother of Clara and Lucas. 2 children, 2 very different stories, 2 opposite ways of needing me. The conflict began the day I had to choose between being with both of them, knowing deep down that I couldn't. For years, I defined myself as a present mother, not perfect, I never was, but available. The kind that answers the phone at any hour, that reorganizes her day if necessary, that learns to read between the lines. I raised my children alone for a long time, and that forced me to sharpen my instincts, to make mistakes quickly and correct on the go. At least that's what I believed. Clara, my older daughter, was always different, not because she didn't need me, but because she learned early not to ask. Responsible since she was a child, organized, with an almost irritating ability to stand on her own. I saw it as a virtue. It gave me peace of mind. It told me I had done something right with her. Lucas, on the other hand, grew up at a different pace, more fragile, more volatile. His emotions were always intense, unpredictable. There were days when he seemed fine, and then suddenly a call would unravel everything. Over time, without realizing it, I began to occupy different places in their lives. With Clara, I was more of an observer. I trusted. I waited for her to tell me when she wanted to. With Lucas, I was on permanent alert, as if something could happen at any moment if I let my guard down. I never thought of it as favoritism. I thought of it as necessity. Months before that day, Clara told me about an important professional event. She didn't say it like someone mentioning something in passing. She explained in detail what it was about, who would be there, why it was key to her career. I listened attentively, proud, and when she asked me to accompany her, I didn't hesitate. She said she didn't need help, that she just wanted to see me there, that it gave her calm. That word resonated with me. I said yes, I wrote it down. We repeated it several times. We talked about the trip, the clothes, the nerves. Every time she mentioned it, I nodded, convinced I would be there. There was no reason to think otherwise. Until there was. The morning of the event, Lucas called early, too early. I recognized the tone before he finished the first sentence. He told me he wasn't feeling well, that he was overwhelmed, that he was scared. He didn't talk about a specific reason or a specific crisis. He talked about not being alone, and that was enough to make everything else secondary. I felt that old, almost automatic reflex, the fear of not arriving on time, of making a mistake, of carrying an impossible guilt if something went wrong. While talking to him, I looked at the clock, I thought of Clara, of the trip, of the schedule. I thought she would understand, she always understood. I made the decision quickly, or at least I thought I did. I called Clara and told her I wouldn't be able to go with her. I didn't search for many words. I told her Lucas needed me, that he wasn't well, that I hoped she would understand. There was an uncomfortable silence on the other end. Then her voice, calm, too calm. "It's okay, Mom." She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she didn't blame me for anything. We hung up, and I felt relief. A brief, deceptive relief, as if the absence of conflict confirmed that I had done the right thing. I went back to Lucas, I sat by his side, I made him some tea. The day passed without any major incidents. There was no serious crisis. We watched television, we talked little. By the afternoon, he seemed better, almost as if nothing had happened. I, on the other hand, didn't stop looking at the clock. Every hour that passed, I imagined Clara in that place, alone. I told myself that an emotional emergency outweighs any presentation, that some futures are sustained and others are broken, that I couldn't be in two places at once. I clung to that. What I didn't know yet was that that decision made in minutes wouldn't stay in that day, that it wouldn't just be an absence. It would become something harder to name, something that would only start to make noise when the silence fully set in. The next day, I woke up with the strange feeling of having run a marathon without leaving my house. My body was tired, my head was full. Lucas was still sleeping in the guest room. I heard him breathe before making coffee, as if I needed to check that he was still there. That gesture came to me on its own, without thinking. Then I looked at my phone. I had a message from Clara sent in the middle of the night. 2 words. It's over. I didn't know how to read it. It could mean many things or nothing. I replied with something neutral, asking how it had gone, saying I hoped everything had turned out well. There was no immediate response. Not at noon, nor in the afternoon. I told myself she must be busy, tired, processing. I forced myself not to insist. Lucas, on the other hand, was better, much better. He ate breakfast with an appetite. He talked about plans, about work, about trivial things. At no point did he mention again how bad he had felt the day before. He didn't ask about his sister. He didn't seem aware of what he had displaced. That made me uncomfortable, but I didn't know what to do with that feeling. I preferred to keep it to myself. 2 days passed until the topic came up again, and it wasn't in the way I expected. We were in a family group chat, one of those that survive out of inertia. An aunt commented on something seemingly innocent. She said she had seen Clara at her presentation, that she had done very well, that it was noticeable she was alone, that someone had asked about me. I read that message several times. No one accused me directly. No one said anything else. But the silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable. I felt a mixture of shame and defensiveness, as if I had to justify myself to people who didn't know the context. I told myself again that it had been an emergency, that it wasn't the same. That night I wrote to Clara, not to explain myself, not entirely. I asked her how she was, how she felt. It took her hours to reply. When she did, it was proper, polite, distant. She said it had gone well, that it was all done. She didn't add anything else, not an emotion, not a detail. I closed the chat with a feeling I couldn't name at that moment. I started to notice the change in the following days. It wasn't something explosive. There were no reproaches or arguments. It was more subtle. Clara stopped calling me to tell me things. She didn't ask for my opinion. She'd reply with monosyllables when I wrote. If I suggested we meet, she'd say she was busy. Always with kindness, always without conflict. That's what threw me off the most. With Lucas, everything remained the same. He'd call me, he'd come to the house, we'd talk about the usual things. When I casually mentioned the day of the event, he said he didn't remember being that bad, that maybe he had exaggerated a little. He laughed uncomfortably. That comment hit me like a dry blow. I didn't say anything. I changed the subject. I started to mentally review other scenes, other moments, other times when Clara had been left in the background without making a fuss. I resisted calling it a pattern. I preferred to think of coincidences, of different contexts, of different needs, but the discomfort grew. I tried to talk to her in person. Weeks later we sat down for coffee. It was a pleasant chat, almost superficial, until I asked her directly if she was angry with me. She shook her head, said no, that it wasn't anger, that she had simply understood something. When I asked her to explain, she said a phrase that still resonates. It wasn't that you didn't come, it was that you decided I could handle it. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't cry, she said it like someone stating a fact. I felt the air leave my body. I tried to justify myself. I spoke of the call, of the fear, of the urgency. I said I thought she would understand. She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and weariness. She told me yes, that she understood, that she had always understood, and that was precisely the problem. I left that coffee shop with the feeling of having arrived late to something important. I didn't know what to do next. Lucas continued to occupy his usual place, unaware of the cost. Clara began to build distances without drama, and I was left in the middle trying to uphold a version of myself that I no longer fully believed. For weeks, I lived with a dull discomfort, like a background noise that never turns off. It wasn't guilt in the classic sense, not that immediate remorse that pushes you to apologize. It was something slower, more corrosive, a constant suspicion that I had misunderstood my own role for years. I began to observe small scenes with a different attention, details that used to seem normal to me and now didn't. Lucas calling me for anything, even for minimal decisions. Me always responding, dropping whatever I was doing. Clara sending more spaced-out messages. Almost administrative. Me taking a long time to reply, telling myself we'd talk calmly later, as if time with her was flexible and his was urgent. I don't remember deciding that consciously. I never sat down to think about who to prioritize. It just happened. Every time Lucas went into crisis, everything else was suspended. Every time Clara achieved something, I celebrated it, but from a more distant, more confident place, as if her strength was a guarantee that nothing would happen if I wasn't there. There was one afternoon when I tried to write a long message to Clara. I drafted it and deleted it several times. I wanted to explain myself, but every sentence sounded like an excuse. I wanted to tell her I didn't love her less, but that didn't answer what had happened. In the end, I sent something brief. How are you? It took her a whole day to reply. Busy, that's all. That distance began to feel definitive, not like a punishment, but like a silent decision. I realized that I no longer knew what she was working on, what worried her, what plans she had. Not because she was hiding it from me, but because she had stopped including me. I was still there, available, but I was no longer necessary. With Lucas, the opposite happened. Our relationship remained intact, almost too intact, as if nothing had moved. Sometimes I thought about that day and expected some gesture, some question about his sister, some sign of awareness. It didn't come. When I mentioned the call again, he said he might have felt bad, but that it wasn't that big of a deal, that he was better now. He said it without malice, but it disarmed me. That was the first time I really doubted, not the seriousness of his condition, but my reaction. I began to wonder if I had confused emotional urgency with moral priority, if I had responded more to my fear than to his real needs. If, by protecting him, I had also protected myself from an anticipated guilt. I remembered other situations, other promises made to Clara that had dissolved without confrontation, other times when I assumed she could handle it alone. She never complained to me, never raised her voice. I saw that clearly now. It had been part of the problem. Her silence had taught me not to see her. I tried to talk to friends, but I always told the summarized version. My son was sick. I had to be there. Everyone would nod. No one questioned that logic. I didn't either out loud, but inside something didn't add up. Because the consequence hadn't been a passing conflict, it had been a slow, constant loss. There was one night when I looked at old photos, Clara as a girl, serious, focused. Lucas, younger, crying, clinging to me. I thought about how many times I had run to one and expected the other to understand. I thought about how many times I had confused strength with a lack of need. I didn't reach any clear conclusion, just an uncomfortable feeling that maybe it wasn't about that particular day, that day had only made visible something that had been there before, something Clara had learned to accept and that I had learned not to see. And as that idea began to take shape, I understood that it was no longer enough to explain myself, that there were decisions that couldn't be undone, that the damage, when it's silent, doesn't announce when it becomes permanent. The point of no return didn't come with an argument, but with an absence. I found out almost by chance that Clara had moved, not out of the city, not that far, but far enough not to pass through my neighborhood anymore, not to make impromptu visits, not to run into each other by routine. She told me in a short, practical message, like someone informing an office of a change of address. I replied with forced enthusiasm. I asked her if she was happy, if she needed anything. She said yes, that she was fine, that she had everything sorted out. That phrase appeared again. Everything sorted out. I realized there was no longer room for me in that process. Not because she was actively excluding me, but because she had learned not to count on me. I tried to see her more often, proposing lunches, coffees, simple plans. There was always a valid reason to postpone. Work, tiredness, commitments, nothing I could reproach her for, nothing that would justify a scene. The distance was solidifying in the everyday, in the unsaid. One Sunday, Lucas came for lunch. We talked about the usual things. At one point, I mentioned that Clara had moved. He looked up, surprised. I didn't know. He said they hadn't spoken in a while. He shrugged and continued eating. That minimal gesture hit me harder than any reproach. The disconnection between them was total, and I had been the bridge that had broken without me realizing it. I asked him if he didn't find it strange. He said they each had their own lives, that Clara had always been like that, independent, capable. I heard myself agreeing, repeating words I had used for years. They suddenly sounded empty. That afternoon, when Lucas left, I was alone in the house. The silence was different, not peaceful, dense. I walked through the rooms as if looking for something that was no longer there. I thought about calling Clara, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to ask her to come back. I didn't want to force a place I had lost through attrition. For the first time, I considered that the damage wasn't just emotional. It had altered the structure of my family. It had created a hierarchy without naming it. Lucas continued to occupy the center, comfortable, supported. Clara orbited far away, self-sufficient, invisible. And I had been the axis that allowed that order. I tried one last conversation. I asked to see her, she accepted. We sat across from each other, and I felt a distance that wasn't physical. I told her I missed her, that I felt I had failed. She listened attentively, without interrupting. When I finished, she said something simple, that she didn't need apologies, that she needed actions, that she had already learned not to expect them. I didn't know what to reply because she was right, because there were no promises I could make that wouldn't sound hollow, because I understood that some decisions, once made, reorder everything they touch. I left that meeting with the certainty that I had lost something that couldn't be recovered with intention, that I had confused care with reaction, that I had chosen again and again without saying it out loud, and that now, for the first time, I was seeing the full consequences of that choice. Life went on. That was the most disconcerting thing. There was no formal breakup, no shouts, no slammed doors. Everything continued seemingly the same, but with a crack that no one mentioned. Lucas kept coming to the house, calling me for any reason, occupying his usual place. Clara went on with her life, neat, orderly, increasingly far from mine. I began to notice that I no longer knew how to approach her without intruding. I'd reread every message I wrote 3 times before sending it. Every invitation carried the implicit fear of another polite refusal. It wasn't an open rejection, it was something more definitive, a silent withdrawal. At family gatherings, Clara was there, proper, even affectionate, but distant. She talked to me like you talk to someone who is important and no longer occupies the center. Lucas, on the other hand, was still the same. He didn't perceive the attention, he didn't ask, he didn't seem to register the change. Sometimes that made me angry, other times guilty, most of the time, tired. One day I understood that no one was going to come and tell me that this was the result of my decisions. There would be no external judgment or explicit punishment. The punishment was daily, it was not being called, not being needed, not being chosen, and knowing with an uncomfortable clarity that I had contributed to that. I thought many times about that turned-off reminder, about how easy it was to swipe my finger and justify everything in the name of urgency. I thought about how many times I had done the same, without there being a visible alarm. Always with good reasons, always with fear, always believing I was taking care. Today I'm still a mother to both, but not in the same way. With Lucas, I maintain a daily, stable, almost intact bond. With Clara, a correct, respectful, colder relationship. There was no fight, no closure, just a distance that settled in and no one dared to discuss. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been different if I had chosen something else that day, or if the damage was already done long before, if it wasn't just once, but a pattern. I helped one in the name of urgency and lost something with the other that I don't know if can be recovered. I chose urgency, and I still wonder if the truly important thing was not to be absent again. Story 2. I demanded my daughter raise her sister's child for 3 years so her sister could go abroad, then called her selfish when she refused. Before we go on, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. I know how it sounds. Believe me, I know. But it's not as simple as it seems. There's much more behind it. And if you let me tell it from the beginning, maybe you won't see me as the villain everyone says I am. I'm a single mother. I'm 63 years old, and I live in the house my parents left me before they died. It's modest, but it's my home. In that same house I raised my 2 daughters practically alone. Mabel, the eldest, is 34 years old. Leah, the youngest, is 29. Each with her own character, her dreams, her wounds, and as usually happens, very different from each other. They both have a daughter. Mabel has a 6-year-old girl, and Leah a 5-year-old. They raise them alone most of the time. Mabel works from home doing custom designs, and her husband works out of the country, so she handles everything. Leah, on the other hand, has a stable office job that completely absorbs her. For 2 years, Leah has been leaving her daughter with Mabel to take care of her. Sometimes a few hours, sometimes all day. At first it was occasional, but then it became routine. She never paid her anything. It was never discussed much. It was simply taken for granted. Mabel, without saying much, accepted. I honestly thought that was normal, that sisters help each other out, that if one can, the other gets a little rest. But things started to change a couple of weeks ago when Leah came home with a smile I hadn't seen on her in years. Mom, she told me, they offered me a job abroad. 3 years. It's a unique opportunity. A big company, stability, a better salary. What I always dreamed of. I got excited for her. Really, I saw in her eyes the illusion she'd lost years ago. But then came the hard part. I don't want to take my daughter. I don't want to change her life, the language, the school. Plus, I wouldn't have time to take good care of her there. I thought maybe you could keep her in the meantime. That's when my heart shrank. Leah, my love, I don't have the strength to raise a little girl anymore. I can barely handle myself. If I were 10 years younger, maybe. But now she looked at me with wet eyes. And that's when it occurred to me what made sense in my mind. What if you propose it to your sister, to Mabel? She answered as if she hadn't considered it. Do you think she'd accept? She already takes care of your daughter most of the time. It'd just be a few more hours a day. No, she didn't seem convinced, but she thought about it. And since Mabel was coming to eat with us on Saturday, I proposed we talk about it that day calmly as a family. Maybe if we asked her nicely, she'd accept. After all, she was already doing it, just not formally. But now that I write this, I realize how blind I was, how I was about to plant a bomb in the middle of my family without realizing it, because what seemed like a small favor ended up being the beginning of the end. Mabel doesn't know we're going to ask her something that could change our lives forever. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. I spent the whole morning cooking, not just because I wanted the food to be special, but because my nerves were on edge. Leah was helping me in the kitchen, but she was restless, like a teenager waiting for exam results. She was afraid. Me too. Mabel arrived on time. As always. Her daughter ran straight to hug her cousin, and seeing them laugh together made me think maybe everything would turn out fine, that it was logical, that the right thing would be to support each other, that somehow this favor made sense. We ate with laughter, anecdotes, and inside jokes only a family can share. For a moment, the air was light, but all the clean plates on the table were a silent countdown. When we finished dessert, Leah cleared her throat. Her voice was shaking, but she went for it. Mabel, I wanted to tell you something important. I was offered a job opportunity abroad. 3 years. It's crazy, but it's real. Mabel smiled in surprise. Seriously, congratulations. That sounds amazing.
No, Mom.
I nodded, holding my breath. Yes, it's a great opportunity for her. Leah lowered her voice a bit, as if trying to soften what was coming. And well, Part of the problem is I can't take my daughter. I wouldn't have time or stability there. I don't want to take her out of her world, her language, her routine. And I thought maybe you could keep her during that time. Silence fell like a heavy sheet over the table. Mabel stood still with her spoon halfway to her mouth. Then she carefully put it down on the plate. It'd only be for 3 years, Leah said quickly. You already know her. You already take care of her almost every day. It would be a natural transition, Leah, Mabel said with an awkward smile. I can barely handle my own things. I'm raising my daughter alone. My husband isn't here. I have work. This isn't the same as taking care of her a few afternoons. But you already do it, Leo insisted. What are a few more hours? She's your niece. So what? Being her aunt forces me to raise her as if she were mine. That's when her tone changed. And with it, everything changed. Mabel, please, I intervened. Your sister is fighting for her future. Is it so hard for you to help her a little more? She looked at me as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. Help her a little more. Mom, I've been taking care of her daughter for 2 years without saying a word. That doesn't count as help.
Of course it counts.
But what? Now it turns out if I say no, I'm the bad guy. I didn't say that. Leah jumped in, visibly upset. I just hoped for once you wouldn't think only of yourself. You always play the victim. Mabel stood up slowly. There was no more smile, no more sweetness. Think of myself. Do you know how many times I've gone without sleep taking care of 2 girls at once while you're calmly working? Do you know what it's like to be sick and still get up to warm up milk for your daughter? Because you don't even know. You don't have to exaggerate. Leah snapped. Exaggerate. You left me with the responsibility without asking me, and now you come ask me to raise her for 3 years, as if it were a little favor.
No, Leah, that's enough.
I tried to smooth the situation. I put a hand on her shoulder. Daughter, just think about it.
We aren't demanding it.
She brushed my hand off gently, but firmly. You are doing it, you're cornering me. And you know what, Mom, it's always been like this. It's always Leah first. Always help your sister. She needs it more. And Mimi, when have I had the right to say no? That's not fair, I murmured. I've done the best I could for you guys. Yes, well this time the best I can do is leave. And without saying another word, she grabbed her daughter, her purse, and walked out the door. She didn't even look at us. Leah stood frozen. Me in shock. The table still had leftover food on it, but suddenly it looked like an emotional crime scene. I thought everything would end there. That with a little time things would calm down, that Mabel would reason again, but that night, I made the worst mistake possible. I opened the family group chat. And that night, I made the worst possible mistake. I opened the family group chat. I just wanted to vent. I thought if the others knew what happened, they'd understand. They'd support Leah. They'd tell me Mabel was overreacting, that she was unfair, that a sister doesn't deny that kind of help to the other. So I wrote not with anger, but with an almost diplomatic tone. Oh, or so I thought. It's very sad when a daughter decides not to support her own sister out of selfishness. Family is for helping each other, not turning your back when they need you most. Leah, without consulting me, added her own message minutes later. I just asked for help so I can work and secure a future for my daughter. Mabel told me yes many times, and now she takes it back. It breaks my soul. She doesn't want me to grow. And of course, like everything in this family, all hell broke loose. First came the typical reactions. What a shame, you guys have to talk, that's not right. Then one of the cousins replied, Mabel was always like that, wasn't she? Kind of closed off. And there, as if she'd been summoned, Mabel appeared. As if I'm responsible, sick of being used, of them thinking that because I keep quiet I have to say yes to everything. Silence. Nobody answered until Mabel sent the first image. It was a screenshot, then another and another. Entire conversations between her and Leah. Messages where Leah asked her at the last minute to keep the girl, where she told her it was already a habit, where Mabel clearly said, this can't keep going on like this. I need a break. A voice memo. Leah sang with a casual tone. Well, whether you like it or not, you're the one with time. You can't always say no more screenshots. Mabel asking if she could have the weekend off. Leah answering, "Don't mess with me. You know how this is." And then a text from Mabel that froze the entire group. "I never promised to raise your daughter. I did it because I couldn't stand seeing my niece alone. But not for you, Leah, it was for her. And if I say no now, it's because I have boundaries. And you never respected them." I froze. The responses started swirling. Some relatives who previously supported Leah started commenting, "This looks different with the screenshots. Did you really think about leaving your daughter with her for 3 years without asking her properly? It's nobody's obligation to raise other people's kids, not even among siblings." Someone else wrote, "Mabel, I'm sorry I didn't listen to you before. This is wrong." Leah was white. She didn't say anything. She just stared at the cell phone as if the letters were stabbing her. She looked at me and said, "What do we do now?" But I had no answer because we had no control over anything. By the next day, half the family had stopped answering our messages. Some left the group. A cousin wrote privately she couldn't help with childcare anymore until this all calmed down. Mabel blocked us both at 2. And then she wrote one last public bombshell. "For 2 years, I endured. I kept quiet. I raised a little girl who wasn't mine because I thought it was the right thing to do. But you guys wanted to humiliate me. You forced me to show proof. What broke the family wasn't my decision to say no. It was your decision to force me to carry what isn't my responsibility." And she added another phrase that stuck with me. "I'm no longer afraid of being the selfish one. If that means setting boundaries, then so be it." After that, the group went silent. Leah tried to call her. She wrote to her, "Nothing, I did too. Nothing." And for the first time in a long time, I felt we had no one anymore, so I went to look for her. But this time, not as a mother, but as the woman who maybe betrayed her unintentionally. I knocked on the door with trembling hands. I didn't know if she was going to open it for me. 3 days had passed since the family group scandal, since her name was exposed as the selfish one, and then, as the one who endured too much, Mabel opened. She looked at me in silence. Her face was dry, firm, without a trace of emotion. "What do you want to talk about, please?" She let me in without saying anything. The apartment was silent. Her daughter slept in the back room with the door ajar. We sat face to face at the dining table, the same one where I once taught her to multiply. I didn't know where to start. "Mabel, daughter, I don't want to fight. I just came to talk."
Speak.
"I just want to understand. Do you really think we did all this to hurt you? Do you want me to tell you no?"
What?
"Everything was a misunderstanding," she said with crossed arms. "Because it wasn't. Mom, you knew. You knew I was getting fed up, that I needed someone to understand me. And you still push me more." "She's your sister," I murmured. "And I'm your daughter. Or did you forget?" I choked on my own words. I took a deep breath. "I just wanted you guys to help each other."
Help each other.
She laughed without joy. "You wanted me to take charge, not out of love or family, out of convenience because you can't anymore, and because Leah never could. So who's left? Me, always me, Mabel. What you're saying isn't fair. I made sacrifices for you guys too." "Oh yeah. When did you defend me? When did you worry about how I felt taking care of 2 girls all day with my husband thousands of miles away, while you and Leah made plans for her future? Do you know the times I got up at dawn because Lee's girl had a fever, the times I postponed work deliveries to be there, but you never said it because I thought it was my duty? Why did I believe it? Because you always made me feel that if I didn't help Leah, I was a bad sister. But not anymore. I'm not going to carry that anymore. We aren't asking you to raise her daughter, her whole life. Just 3 years. Just do you know what happens in 3 years in a child's life? She becomes another person. She learns, grows, attaches. Do you want my daughter and her cousin to grow up as sisters and then separate again? Do you want me to spend 3 years explaining why her mom isn't here?" My voice broke. "It's just that I can't do it, Mabel. I don't have the strength. I don't have the energy. I feel guilty. If I could, I'd do it." Mabel gave me a long look. Her eyes were full, but not of sadness, of a contained, silent, burning rage. "You didn't come to apologize. You came to convince me to betray myself again." "No, daughter, that's not it. And you know what the worst part was? That after all that, you joined the chat. You wrote that message. You put the selfish sign on my forehead for the whole family to read. I was just trying to help you too, I said, looking down. I thought with a little pressure. Pressure? From who? From cousins who haven't visited me in years. From aunts who don't even know my daughter? Is that what you wanted? To put me in the center, so everyone would lynch me. I never imagined you'd respond like that. Well, now you know. You force me to show things that humiliate me, to expose the misery of an unequal relationship between sisters. You did that. Forgive me, I said with real tears.
For the first time without defense.
I didn't know how to handle it. Mabel stood up, went to the door, opened it without looking at me. Do you know what the saddest part is, Mom? I looked at her in silence. That if I didn't say it, nobody was going to say it. They were going to keep looking at me as the available daughter, the one who takes care, the one who resolves, the one who doesn't complain. But it's over. And Leah can learn the hard way what being a mother is. Like I learned alone, like you learned too. No, I couldn't answer. And you can keep supporting her. Let's see if now she sends you money for your meds, because I'm not going to do it anymore. That has nothing to do with this. Of course it does, it has everything to do with it. Because you guys used me to support yourselves. And now that I said I'm not the witch, I didn't mean to hurt you, but you did. So own up to it. And she shut the door in my face. And when I turned around to leave, I understood that my daughter was no longer angry. She was disappointed. And that wound doesn't heal easily. Since that night, Mabel never answered me again. No calls, no messages. She blocked me everywhere. I knew it when I tried to send her an audio and got message, not delivered. Her number no longer exists for me. She doesn't answer Leah either, doesn't talk to her, doesn't let her see her niece, and that, I think, is what hurts her the most, because no matter how much Leah denies it, her daughter is starting to notice something isn't right. She no longer plays with her cousin, no longer goes to that house she once called her second home. And I don't know how to move forward. I don't have a fixed income. Mabel helped me with money every month, no strings attached. I never asked her for it, but she did it. Now she not only stopped, but made it very clear that if I want help, I should ask Leah. And Leah tries, but she can't. Her new salary isn't enough. Hiring a nanny costs her a fortune. What little she has goes to bills, food, taxis, racing against the clock to pick up the girl. She stayed, rejected the offer, lost that opportunity, and I wonder if it was worth it. We tried everything. We talked to other cousins, aunts, even a neighbor. Nobody wanted to take charge of the girl. Nobody wants to be involved in that family drama. As they told us, everyone is afraid of ending up like Mabel. Isolated, betrayed, exposed. Once again, the house is full of heavy silences, unsaid tensions. Leah cries in the bathroom at night. I pretend not to hear. And my granddaughter, my poor granddaughter, only asks when I'm going back to Aunt Mabel's house. I don't know what to answer. Sometimes I tell myself Mabel was cruel, that she could have helped us, that if the roles were reversed, Leah would have said yes, that I would have done it, that it was just a little more time, a little more love, but then I remember her eyes, that mix of sadness and fury. That tremble in her voice when she said, I'm no longer your emergency daughter. And something in me breaks. Could she have been right? Could I have gotten used to Mabel resolving everything? To her carrying what I couldn't and what Leah didn't want to? Could I have become dependent? Not on her love, but on her endurance. I don't know. I know I tried to do it for the good of the family, that I didn't want to see Leah give up her dreams, that if I could have, I would have done it myself, but I couldn't. And now nobody else wanted to do it. Does that make me the bad guy? Am I bad for having expected one daughter to sacrifice for another? Am I bad for having used family pressure, or am I simply a mother who did what she could with the tools she had, and with more fear than malice? I don't expect to be forgiven. I just hope someday someone understands me, and yes, maybe I was wrong, but if that makes me a bad mother, then let someone tell me, because I no longer know what's right and what's not okay.